It's easy to notice that Genshin Impact's playable character roster does contain lots and lots of women, and because of their sheer number, you'd expect them to have some overlapping traits, right? While that is true to some degree, you'll notice some fans are too quick to round them all up into a single category with sweeping statements. One of these categories would be the overworked waifu, which, to be fair, is the result of many female characters in Genshin being depicted as hardworking. But the problem with this term is that first of all, it uses the term overworked rather than hardworking, kinda taking away the person's agency, and the waifu part also seems to insinuate that these women's hardworking personalities are simply shown to brand them as objects of affection for the players rather than contributing to their own characterizations. And the term overworked waifu is often used as a central quote-unquote argument in some fans' claims that the women in Genshin Impact have repetitive and bland personalities. So today I'm gonna quickly analyze the personalities of these supposed overworked waifus, as well as explain how the game's writers can better depict their personalities and how we the fans can better analyze characters like these. So let's get started with an overview of each hardworking woman's work ethic. Starting with Jean, she's actually my favorite out of the bunch because of her role as a government official and a public servant. Of course, part of her motivation to work hard is the expectations people have for her, especially from her clan. But I'd say that what mainly drives her to work hard is her belief that this is what her constituents deserve. You know, they deserve a government that addresses their individual and community level needs, and the way it can do that is through hard work. As a leader, she has to set a good example for the rest of the Knights of Favonius to guide the institution's overall vision for peacekeeping and national development. She does a lot of work because she doesn't shy away from minor commissions, and she has to compensate for the lack of manpower available within the Knights, since lots of them are out on the expedition. Basically, her themes mostly revolve around servant leadership, and that's the reason why I adore her a lot. I really do see her hard work as stemming from her passion to serve the country in a systematic way other than focusing all her efforts only on national defense. It's also interesting to note that she can be quite strict on herself while living in the land of freedom, but the way I interpret this is that her self-imposed strictness is something that she freely chooses for herself, as she can feel like it'll make her and her nation grow. Keqing may initially seem similar to Jean, with her also being a government official who works hard, but like her lightning teleportation skills, she's more well known for her thorough and fast pace of work, stemming from her high levels of perfectionism, which makes her very demanding of her other colleagues. This might make her seem stricter, more overbearing, and even more annoying, but I admire this quality of hers. Kinda like a candidate for valedictorian who wants to conquer the world type of vibes. She seems like the type of person to get work done easily in group works and commands the group consistently. She may be bossy, but who else can we rely on, right? And like Jean, she also doesn't look down on menial work, which is why she even served as a laborer for a few months to understand how to improve work conditions. Keqing is someone who likes to push for progressive ideas and new improvements to the traditional ways of governance, and in order for her visions to be realized, she has to work on them herself, or else they won't exist beyond her imagination. Thus, she's a visionary and a career woman at heart, because it seems like she believes that her work is able to help usher in a new era of governance and progress. Out of all the women mentioned here, Ganyu is one who has worked the longest because of her contract with Rex Lapis. Although lots of these women have a strong sense of duty, it's still more flexible compared to Ganyu's literal contract with a god. But that doesn't mean she has absolutely no choice. She is still very much willing to do her work because she understands how much the Keqing relies on her, since she really has been their secretary from the very start of their establishment. It can be difficult to have generations of people relying on you, but it's something that can give her a sense of importance and the sense that she can continue to contribute to Liyue even beyond the Archon War. I think lots of people have a lot of respect for the vigilant Yaksha Xiao, who continues to vanquish demons, keeping people safe even long after the Archon War. So while he's doing that, Ganyu mirrors his duties in the human realm, but instead of safeguarding Liyue from literal demons, she protects them from corrupt tax-evading demons. She doesn't really take on a position of leadership, but she provides stability, support, and guidance for the Keqing, so in a sense her work ethic itself is like a gift to the Keqing. So her theme seems to revolve around the maintenance of a long-established order. In a sense, almost like a counterpart to Keqing's progress. Not to say that they're direct opposites, but she provides the grounding of the Keqing so it can maintain its integrity even alongside consistent changes. Now, when it comes to Kokomi, she performs more of a dual role as both a commander during wartime and a leader who's supposed to address the concerns of Watatsumi Island residents, especially with limited support from the central government of the shogunate. Jean also has to fulfill similar duties, but she's not a priestess, so the expectations people have of her may not be too informed by a lot of fanaticism. Unlike with Kokomi, we see her story quest and how people crowd her very often because I think the symbolism of her being a priestess might lead her constituents to view her as almost like a savior practically. Also, she has the added pressure of having to represent the interests of a grossly underrepresented group of people. And so it seems like she does surprisingly more emotional labor than you'd expect. Her work seems to be mostly aimed at healing others, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and together with that, she's tasked with always serving as a symbol of hope for her people. With Noelle, I think I might have quite a unique interpretation of her since obviously at first glance, she just seems like someone who genuinely wants to help at all times, just because. But combined with the fact that she's been really striving to become a knight but hasn't been able to pass any examinations, to me it seems like her desire to help others also comes with a desire to feel important and influence her surroundings even though she's not a full-fledged knight yet. She does seem to take an interest in public service just like Jean, and she gets to sample some of that work even as a maid. That's not to say at all that Noelle doesn't like helping others for its intrinsic value, but I think it's also a way for her to really figure out what she excels at and thrive in that realm, to carve out a niche for herself, so to speak. I'm thinking it's kinda similar to Toma becoming a housekeeper in the Kamisato estate, branding himself as indispensable despite him being a foreigner who's often discriminated against. Of course, all the women here work hard to prove themselves, but I think that theme is more highlighted with Noelle, since compared to the others, she still has a different vision of who she wants to be that hasn't been achieved yet. And so her work helps her feel like she's inching towards that goal, and it's simultaneously beneficial to those around her. I just thought it'll be nice to explain this in case people think Noelle just does tons of work just because she'll die if she can't serve people, you know. Compared to the other women on our list, Layla struggles a lot with her work, not because she's someone who loves really putting in extra time because of her own sense of motivation, but because she feels like it's the only way she can survive in such a competitive environment such as the academia. And that's also the reason why she's very relatable, with her issues hitting hard for us players who are in college. That's not to say that Layla is only driven by external pressures, because she's always faced with the choice to stay or leave her program, but she always stays, which is a sign of her tenacity. So in her case, her hard work indicates her acceptance of a grueling challenge, although some of her burdens can be eased by her having more confidence in herself. Her hard work is also a way for quote-unquote ordinary people like her to gain a chance at academic excellence and the ability to influence and contribute to her field of research in the future, even though she's supposedly not naturally smart. Her character represents an excellent critique of the academia's work culture and how it's important to not let societal expectations break you. It's notable that she's the only playable character who's currently enrolled as a student in the academia, so it's very important to include voices such as these. So overall, her work ethic and struggles revolve a lot around the concepts of competition and survival. For these next three, the reason why I grouped Sara, Ningguang, and Yanfei together is because they only work a few extra hours. You wouldn't really know that they're very busy if not for short mentions in their character stories or quick remarks of theirs. And I think it's because their work comes more naturally to them, And they also have more control over their work habits and don't constantly need to satisfy external critics. I'd say that with Kujo Sara, her strictness is more highlighted over her hard work, while Ningguang's economic ingenuity is more emphasized and Yanfei's nerdiness is more apparent. That's not to say that their approach to work is automatically better than that of the other female characters I mentioned earlier. It's just that their work attitudes are presented in a different way, likely since many of their career goals have been realized already. And in some sense, they are also somewhat privileged to not encounter work difficulties which are more imposing and suffocating in nature, since they're either self-employed or at the very top of the workplace hierarchy. Now that I've done a quick overview of each overworked waifu's work ethic and motivations, it seems like it's easy enough for players to analyze each woman's personality, right? Well, that's not necessarily the case. Of course, the Genshin fandom often fails at reading comprehension as a whole, and they tend to take things at face value, but that problem is also somehow exacerbated by the storytelling of Genshin Impact itself. It's not bad storytelling exactly, but it makes certain character information inaccessible, and because of how it releases tons and tons of characters without having the time to give each one a spotlight for more than 5 minutes during prominent quests or events, these characters need to make a striking first impression lest they be forgotten. So oftentimes you can encounter characters who don't seem that noteworthy to you at first glance but have a lot more going on underneath the surface, and yet that depth gets unexplored a lot of the time. I think that's part of the reason why the overworked waifu concept came about. When the game gives a hardworking woman that little amount of screen time, they fill it in with scenes of her being tired and weary from work. Or if they're not straight up collapsing on their desks, then at the very least the traveler is often tasked with tearing them away from their work. It's the recurrences of these plotlines that put these female characters overworked to the forefront instead of their other traits. And of course, there are reasons for this. One is that I guess the writers want to be able to show that a character is hardworking because, diligence is a virtue, but at the same time, I think they're worried that the players won't find these women's work lives to be interesting, especially since most of them deal with government or academic work, so it seems like their solution is to make the women work off-screen. By the time we see them on screen, they're tired so we can tell that they've worked hard without actually seeing them work. Although this seems effective in very quickly establishing the general work ethic of these women, it fails to get into the interesting details which makes each of them unique when it comes to their work styles and the worldviews that come along with them. But I also can't blame the writers completely because they made a really interesting arc in Ganyu's story quest about her investigating tax fraud, and I don't hear people talking about that enough, so yeah. Although I really would argue that the writers should stop feeling hesitant about tackling complex work topics because they can better showcase a character's unique traits. For example, if we get to see Keqing doing interviews in the chasm to help her draft her new proposal for new mining regulations, then that says a lot about her more than just the fact that she works hard. It'll show how considerate she is of her constituents, how open-minded and consultative she is when it comes to receiving various inputs, and how intelligent she is when it comes to problem solving, and how passionate and dedicated she is when it comes to reform. So by detailing how each woman works, you can immediately get a much richer characterization of each of them. They just have to make the story have more stakes, like add an investigation or a corruption-busting arc for spiciness, but keep the work detailed while minimizing unnecessarily long dialogue exchanges which can make players feel impatient. To be fair, some interesting work anecdotes are available in the character profiles, but not all people own the characters in question, and I don't blame those who don't have the time nor willingness to read all of them. Or if this is too hard to do, they can simply just highlight other personality traits aside from hardworkingness if possible, as in they can stop mentioning the fact that they're overworked every time we see them. But I think another reason why tiredness is emphasized so much is also because the game seems to want to pander to its audiences who are most likely to be attracted to the female characters and want to self-insert as the male traveler. They want to show these women to be in low spirits so that the traveler can conveniently get a reason to go on a date with or take care of the woman in question. This is also where I believe some users of the term overworked waifu get a bit confused. Their usual claim seems to be that these overworked waifus are characterized to pander to the audience. But I think it's not their actual characterizations which are responsible for the pandering, since they all have complex motivations. It's more of the story quest arcs or the event appearances that end up pandering to these types of audiences. These women are usually not tired and in need of a date to take a break from work, and most of the time they do not seem to want that. But the narrative itself forces this to happen. It seems to be a very repetitive plot tactic that makes these women seem more vulnerable so that it can kickstart this whole caretaking plot in order to make them closer to the traveler through wildly unnatural circumstances. And the thing is, it's not even bad to be vulnerable. It's just that it almost feels like these women are more often shown having a hard time because of their work instead of excelling at it. Of course, you can experience both, but when discussing a sort of love-hate relationship with work, you really also have to explore what makes the character drawn to their work so that we as the audience can also understand exactly why they have trouble breaking free from some of the impositions of their jobs. Basically, it's more of a framing issue rather than a characterization issue. They are able to conceptualize a hardworking woman with exceptional strengths and a strong will, but the writers don't really know how to communicate that side of the character to the audience. And instead, they always find ways to point out that she's tired from work all the time since they don't know how to properly introduce her other more interesting personality traits outside of brief mentions. If you've played Al-Haytham's story quest already, then you might have seen him with Kaveh at the end, talking idly with a sprinkle of bickering, as always. There's one statement by Al-Haytham in particular that struck me.
게다가 난 건축 디자이너처럼 힘들게 의뢰인에게 잘 보이려고 노력할 필요도 없지.
This obviously angered Kaveh because it does sound like an insult, but in my opinion it's actually a commentary on the struggles of working in the gig economy. And for someone who's supposedly very unempathetic, Al-Haytham is able to pinpoint exactly what bothers Kaveh about his work. If you're more generous with your interpretation of his statement, then you can even think of it as him insinuating that Kaveh deserves a better job, where he shouldn't have to be at the mercy of his clients. Now, that kind of commentary on work, as harsh as it is something that I believe is lacking in the way the Traveler and Paimon interact with these overworked waifus. It's because I feel like almost every time a female character works too hard, the oh-so-golden advice we bestow onto them is apparently just that they should take a break. Now, pardon me for overanalyzing this, but the reason why I have a problem with this is because of how simplistic it sounds, combined with the way this advice puts all the pressure solely on the woman herself to achieve a proper work-life balance, as if it's as easy as that. Of course, in life, you always have a choice, and so even if these women seemingly have no choice but to work hard, they do have the option of relaxing sometimes. However, the advice makes it seem so easy to do. It's as if these women don't have to worry about who will take on their workload when they take a break, or even if the society they belong to pushes forth a hustle culture so much that they can't even feel good about themselves if they don't take a break. Lots of the time, the way work is structured is not conducive to taking breaks and achieving an ideal work-life balance, so I wish there were more discussions of that in Genshin. Yes, I know it's just a game, but if they're gonna keep regurgitating the same whole take a break message, they might as well be nuanced about it, right? Take, for example, Keqing's arc during the Lantern Rite of 2022. Make no mistake, I did enjoy it thoroughly all throughout, but I still had some gripes with some of the messaging. So if you forgot, basically Paimon told a story to Keqing about a chef who thought he could cook all the dishes to the point that he couldn't taste his own cooking anymore, and he didn't want to seek help because he thought he was the only one who was good at cooking, and so the restaurant closed down. It's kind of like a metaphor for how Keqing works. Okay, so it does have a good message in and of itself, but as someone who has worked on several group projects as a de facto leader, I would like to examine the statement, he thought he's the only one capable. Because the thing is, lots of the time in the workplace and even just in school group works, you'll often find people that you really can't trust to do the work because they either freeload or do the bare minimum, and when they submit their part of the work to you, you end up overhauling it almost. So in Keqing's case, because we don't know what her subordinates are like, we can't tell yet if her distrust of them is based on reality or not. It could be that she lacks trust in them even if they're good, or she lacks trust in them because they really do suck, or it could be a combination of both. And so this nuance is something that's lacking in the advice we gave to her. Because in my mind, it's not just the issue of Keqing's bossy personality, but I think it's also an HR kind of issue where I think either the Keqing needs to increase their hiring standards, or they need to create systems which allow for better communication and work feedbacking so that each member of the team can develop trust with one another, and they also need to be thoroughly trained how to do tasks without too much supervision. This will naturally allow Keqing to have more confidence in her people, and it'll allow her to relax more without us forcing her. And then the other cases would be Ganyu's, where the Keqing seems averse to distributing her work to other secretaries, Jean's case where Varka took away too many nights with him on the expedition, leaving her with fewer resources, and Layla's case where she's part of an institution that views academic development solely through a competitive lens and doesn't allow students to grow at their own pace. These are all systemic struggles that should change, and the burden of change shouldn't fall solely on the shoulders of the individual. And I know, this idea is hard to implement in the game, but it's just that I know tons of people who work way too hard and way too much, and it'll be very insulting to simply say, oh, the reason why you're suffering is because of your own character flaw and not partly because of systemic workplace issues. To me, it's not even that the traveler needs to solve these persistent problems, but simply acknowledging them is a great move that would allow them to exhibit more empathy towards these overworked women. Even with Al-Haytham, he's obviously not able to eradicate the ills plaguing the field of freelance work all for his darling Kaveh, right? But even a simple understanding of the other person can go a long way when it comes to making them feel validated. Or also, your attempt could fail, so it depends on the delivery. I guess we can say that the overworked waifu suffers from simplistic framing and a simplistic understanding of them, and that'll likely persist as more characters get released. So with that, I'd like to propose some tips for how we can analyze these overworked female characters more effectively as a whole, even without having to read character-specific analysis threads on Twitter, although those are nice too. The first thing I'd recommend is for players to try using other adjectives for the women aside from overworked or hardworking, and you'll naturally start to notice some differences between them. Some of these characters might be anxious, some might be confident, some might be insistent, and some might be more patient. You can also compare these characters' traits to your own when it comes to work style, so you can also gain a better understanding of your own work habits and what you can improve on. Another thing would be to look for clues that would determine these women's dynamic with their colleagues. For example, Jean is very accepting towards her knight's unique work styles, often praising each one of them and not branding them as lazy. Also, do try to determine the goals and principles these women possess which inform their work habits. What main belief makes them work hard, and how do they assert this belief? You can complement this question by also asking, what are they working so hard to eliminate or avoid? Basically, establish where their sense of conviction lies, and that'll form the core of their character. Once you get that right, your analysis of them will be pretty spot on. Although I will say that it's okay to still not like many of these women even after analyzing them thoroughly. For example, I'm not such a huge fan of Ganyu, just because I can't really relate with corporate culture. The point of this video is not to make you like all these women who are accused of being overworked waifus, but simply to be open-minded and understand where they're coming from, so that you can also perhaps find more respect for other hardworking women you encounter in your lives, and so that you can stop embarrassing yourself with really horribly uninformed character takes on social media. So with that, I hope you enjoyed today's video, especially if I was able to touch on one of your favorite characters. Personally, I'd like to know more about why you love some of these hardworking women, and also how your own work habits are like in comparison. So leave a like and comment below, and also subscribe to my channel if you like detailed and nuanced analyses like this one. You can also share this if you want to read some of your friends of popular character misconceptions. Why not? Go ahead.